Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see you again. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. We're continuing my dramatic reading of the autobiography of an interesting person, Jeff Klitzner's Call Me Tennessee. Now, by now, there's quite a few episodes leading up to this point. It would probably benefit you to have listened to those before you listen to this one. But if you want some really strange out of context stuff happening to a Jewish hobo, come on in. You can get started right now. And we're going to pick up after he's left Israel for the first time and had his cross-country American tour with Chapter 16, Seattle. So my older brother got his first catering job at like 12 years old. You could say he always knew what he wanted to do. He started his kosher catering and restaurant business when he was 20, just after he got married. Now, he put me to work because my mother told him I needed the job. I went to work for him because my mother told me he needed the help. We both got conned by our mother, who is legally insane. She gets checks for it. Working for him was interesting because I'd been a restaurant manager and I'd also held every job possible in the restaurant business. A typical day would start around 4:30 a.m. or so, and the restaurant closed around 9 p.m., which meant it was possible to finish by 11, but probably wouldn't be out the door till 1 on a good day. Now, if there happened to be a catering event, there was no way of telling when I would get off. I was staying at my sister-in-law's parents' house. On the Sabbath, I would spend it with them or my brother or both. None of these things were a problem. It's just when you're doing that type of work, it gets quick. The only friend I had was Jorge, the chef. We understood each other, and we hated the hours and the drama. When we would have somewhat of a free night, we would go out for drinks and from time to time shoot some pool. The life was just too damn repetitive for me. It wasn't the money or even scrubbing floors. It was the pace, lack of sleep, and above all else, the feeling of being alone in the world that I hated. It wasn't like I could just start dating or move out. I hardly had free time to get a haircut. Some of the Mexicans I worked with were cool, but the cycle sucked. Making deliveries to fancy hotels, ballparks, convention centers, ballrooms, Microsoft corporate offices, and stuff just got to be a pain in the ass. And it wasn't fun or rewarding in any way for me. I didn't like the snobs I ran into, and I spent what little free time I had at the casinos. I wanted a little money, but for me it was just a place to escape for an hour or two to wind down so I could get some sleep. I wasn't sure how to deal with any of this stuff. I just knew I was miserable. I figured out what Kurt Cobain was thinking when he shot himself. Something about Seattle just makes people feel icky and depressed. I would go to a few college bars and some Microsoft bars, but none of them were any fun. I couldn't buy a good time in that town. I don't know how anybody lives there. I flew to Memphis for my cousin's wedding, and my brother didn't want to deal with the kids or our lunatic mother. I just wanted to get away. I figured it might change my attitude. I got to Memphis on a Thursday, and I had to find a tux for the black tie wedding at the Peabody Hotel. If you don't know Memphis, the Peabody is our old school Grand Hotel, where rich people like to show off for each other, and of course, they have ducks that play follow the leader once or twice a day through the lobby and into the fountain. Finding a tux wasn't easy or cheap. I was driving around, passed by a tux shop, and they had a nice baby blue tux, and I knew it had to be done. I got the lowdown on the meaning of black tie from the lady at the tux shop, and I got the ruffled shirt, pink bow tie and cummerbund, and white shoes. I got all pimped out, and I tell you, I was nervous at first, but if you're going to do something, you got to go all out. I overheard some of the wedding party who didn't know me questioning who would wear that tux to a wedding. It was obvious they had never met me, for if they had, they would have known that's just how I roll. Moreover, the photographer loved my tux because he wore one similar to his prom in the 70s. The florist informed me that I had more balls than anyone he ever met to get off that elevator and walk past the snickering robots like I owned the damn hotel. I was feeling good, except I hate weddings and that stuff just feels weird. I made do though, as the open bar was nice. I proceeded to get plastered as people in the lobby were making me pose for pictures with them. At some point I hit the wall and was about to pass out when someone invited me up to a suite for an after party. That kind of got me rejuvenated. One of my uncles had to help me out of the hotel, as I was a little too hammered to find the door. I apologized to my aunt and uncle the next day for getting wasted, but that psycho mother of mine had told everybody that I was drugged. The next day, I tried to talk to my aunt and uncle, but they were still pissed and confused about why I would spread rumors about people. That's what happens when one of your parents is psycho. Should I be upset? Probably not. I went to the same high school as both of my cousins, and neither one of them would give me the time of day. So I guess in their eyes, we weren't related. My other cousin is about to get married now, and I wasn't invited. The psycho mother of my brother is going to make a ruckus, but what do I care? I flew back to Seattle and showed my brother the wedding pictures. All he could do was laugh. My sister-in-law said she would have cut off my balls had it been her wedding. I continued to work for my brother despite being miserable. I had nothing else to do. Finally, I told him I couldn't do this anymore and to let me know when a good time to leave would be. I told him I was going to New York, and I was planning on that until I called my uncle in Denver. I asked him about the offer to send me to Europe, if it still stood. He said yeah, so I took him up on it, and then decided not to tell my brother or anybody else where I was going. I just wanted to be left out on my own. I got some traveler's checks and a book about hostels. The day before I left, I helped my brother put some furniture together and helped the father-in-law tar the roof. It wasn't that I was running away from them. I meant no ill will, but that lifestyle wasn't for me. I took all my stuff to Goodwill, dropped it off, and then said goodbye to my nieces. I admire my brother for doing what he does, and respect him for being able to. But me? I prefer to be doing something different that makes me happy. I like the idea of being free and not being a slave to the almighty dollar. I reckon that I just needed to get away and see the world. Now before I left, I stopped by my uncle's in Denver. He was paying for the ticket and offered me money if I needed it. Well, I spent a lot of my life looking up to him. He had money, women, the life, in my opinion. We talked, and it's just one of those things. You might call it a friend-of-the-moment relationship. I still kept in contact with Lunchbox in Congo, and that was about it. I knew one person in London at the time. In fact, he still had my shorts. It took several emails to a mutual friend in Israel to get his phone number. After a pep talk from my uncle, that wound up leaving me somewhat depressed. I boarded a plane for London with a stop in Chicago. Chapter 17. European Vacation Tennessee Style. I know, real original taking a backpack to Europe. I got to the airport in Chicago and went out for a cigarette before I boarded the plane. While outside, I started talking with the wheelchair ladies, and I knew I had about 20 minutes until my flight boarded. I looked at the security lane and asked the wheelchair lady if she would take me through the lines for $5. She said, "No problem, let me finish my Newport." I went right past the checkpoint line and hobbled through the metal detector, and she pushed me to the gate area. When I limped up, the stewardess came to me and asked for my boarding pass. I gave it to her, and she ripped it up and gave me a new one in business class. She said that it would be more comfortable. It was a long flight, and she was right. Sitting right next to her the whole flight, I got my free drink on. I began hitting on her about my fourth Jack and Coke. She asked what I did, and I told her I was taking this trip to figure things out. Not the most original, but definitely cool to be doing at my age. She asked what my plans were. I told her I don't make plans or promises, but I'd love to have dinner with her. She laughed and told me we could do lunch when we landed. The flight was good, and when we landed, I was the first one off the plane. The customs official was playing the "What are your intentions?" game with me. I told him I didn't know how long I was going to be in town or where I was going to stay. I had a friend who lives out near Wembley, not real sure where, but he has my shorts and I plan to get those back. He laughed and asked me how much money I had. I told him around $2,000. He told me I should plan better and that he was going to give me a 6-month no-work travel visa. That was cool, and I took off to meet the chick for lunch. She drove me to the hostel and recommended I stay there, so I checked in. And then we went for some fish and chips. I got her digits and hit the hostel, the Dover Castle or something like that. It was cheap and they had a bar. I started drinking and talking to the people around there. We had some good conversations. I got the heads up on things. And that night went clubbing with a group of female soldiers and a few tourists. The next day I hit the museums and did the touristy crap. By stroke of luck, I met an Australian, and we both understood that there are places where a man's worth is determined solely by the amount of alcohol he can ingest in one sitting. We started drinking beer at 3 p.m., and at 6 a.m. we were both still up. He finally gave up and surrendered to me. I felt like that was the easiest $20 I had ever made. Next day, I met this Italian dame who was awesome, and the only real way for a man like me to score was to make her laugh and act like an asshole. I made this Spanish guy translate my Spanglish into Spanish, and then the Italian guy would translate the Spanish into Italian. Did I mention she spoke English? I kept this going for 3 days until I finally left to reclaim my shorts. I finally got a hold of a friend that I had met at this music festival in Israel called Bombamela. I had one hell of a time getting to the festival. I had to take a bunch of buses and deal with this crazy chick named Gabby. Anyways, at this festival, I came prepared with enough vodka to kill a horse. We would drink, pass out, wake up, hit on this Arab chick in the tent behind us, and I said Arab, not Muslim. We had a great time. Her brother offered me 3 camels and a goat if I married her, but I declined. I would wake up, pop a few pills courtesy of Gabby, smoke a joint courtesy of the Arab, and then mix a tall drink and wander around this festival. It was on that beach where I saw the sexiest thing ever, a 19-year-old chick walking around wearing a bikini and an M16. I don't think I ever really recovered from that festival, which only had one rule. There are no rules. I left the festival in Israel a day early because I had to get back. Somehow in packing, I left a pair of cargo shorts and now I wanted them back. Not that they were great shorts, but I like to wear them on hot days. I didn't know what was going to happen. I met my boy at a pub near where he worked, and after a few rounds, he drove me back to his place. He never told me his father was a member of the House of Lords. When I saw the indoor swimming pool, I flipped. Then I saw his sister, and the jokes kept coming. I spent my time harassing him about how hot his sister was, and that I would trade him a team of goats for her hand in marriage. The next day, while I was in the shower, his maid came and washed all my clothes. As I was getting dressed, the gentleman's gentleman entered and informed me that I was to wear this suit. I put on the suit and figured, okay, I guess I'm going to meet his father today. The gentleman's gentleman gave me a fresh shave, old school barber style, and then he instructed me on how to get to where I was supposed to be. I was unaware I was supposed to be anywhere, but I figured it must be important, so I went along. I told the taxi where I was going. I entered a hotel suite that was packed full of parliament members and other rich people when I spotted my friend. He waved me over and told me if I wanted to shake his hand, I should stand in line like this. I was like, whose hand? He said, Prince William's, the future king of England. I said, yeah, I know who he is, dude. Sure enough, there he was. Prince William with a line of old people waiting to brown nose him. As the prince was doing his handshaking, I noticed he was wearing a glove. So I got out of line and went on the balcony for a cigarette. Apparently, my exit caused a ruckus of sorts. I was soon greeted on the balcony by the prince, who asked why I didn't want to shake his hand. I told him, nothing personal, but if I'm going to shake your hand, I prefer to do it with a firm grip, a look in the eye, and skin. Gloves take away from what you're really doing when you shake a man's hand. He asked, what is that? I explained, you can tell everything you need to know about another man by shaking his hand. You can size him up and measure him by the grip, the calluses on his hand, and by the look in his eye. Or at least, that's what I take handshakes to be. He laughed and said, you have a point. Slid the glove off, gave me a firm grip, and made solid eye contact. At this point, it became apparent that I viewed him as my equal, and while I respected his position, it didn't come with my personal respect until he shook my hand. Afterwards, he asked me where I was going to next on my vacation. I told him I wasn't sure. I was going to meet with this Australian guy from the hostel, and we would flip a coin. Heads, we go to Edinburgh, tails to Amsterdam. He laughed and said it was a pleasure. I got back to my friend's house, grabbed my clothes, and got out of that monkey suit, at which point my friend informed me that his father was having to answer for my actions. I apologized and told him I didn't mean to cause any embarrassment. He laughed and said the people who saw him take the glove off and shake a commoner's hand will be telling that story for years to come. He gave me a ride back to the hostel, and I met the Aussie and hit the bus station. Once there, we flipped a coin. It was Scotland. We got the tickets, and we had a few hours to kill, but he insisted on watching the Ashes, a cricket match between England and Australia. He then proceeded to explain the Game of Kings to me. That night, we polished off a bottle of Jack and just kept the party going until we arrived in Edinburgh. We stumbled off the bus like champs and began looking for a hostel. Only problem was, they had this festival in town for performing arts. Plays and stuff people from all over the world were in town to see. As we passed one hostel, I noticed a sign that said, ask about work for stay. So I asked the big guy behind the desk who said, you clean 2 hours a day? You can stay for free as long as you do a good job. I said, okay, and we began to clean. After doing this for a few days, I saw a sign for people to work handing out flyers. I went into the office inside of a print shop beneath the yoga studio and met Andy. He was cool. He was a bass player, so I told him I was a roadie for Ike Turner and just felt like going solo, hanging out for a while. He put me to work the next day, passing out flyers and hanging posters around the bars and university areas. I walked into one pub and grabbed a beer. The bartender asked me what was going on, so I told him about being a roadie for Ike Turner, and he insisted that I come hang out with him and his band that night. I made the rounds with him for a while. Good people. He introduced me to a Frenchman that needed some work done that wasn't quite legal, but it would pay well. I declined for a while, but kept hanging with the Frenchie because he had tons of women hanging around him. For being French, he was cool, unlike most of the other people from his country. Now, scrubbing toilets doesn't exactly appeal to most, but I found it relaxing. I didn't mind too much. I just used tons of chemicals. The boss was happy, and I pretty much got my choice of places to clean, who I worked with, and I got to train people. Well, one day, I'm sitting around the pool table, and I meet this girl who was drinking scotch. While we were talking, I discovered she was a nudist, and her boyfriend had been in jail for the past 6 weeks for refusing to put on clothes when he went before the judge, and he's going to keep going naked until they let him go. After drinking the night away, she looked at me and asked if I cared to get naughty. I said, okay, so we went up to her room, and there were probably 8 Japanese tourists sleeping in there. She just turned on the lights and we went at it. I didn't care, but I felt bad for those people who had to look at my hairy behind. I went back to my room, passed out around 7 a.m. I heard her voice in the staff bedroom saying, Jeff, do you care for a snuggle? Now, this became a joke for the Aussie who was in the bunk under me. He thought he was dreaming, and after a while, she made me breakfast, and we talked some more. She then told me I was welcome to her car, as she didn't want it anymore. So thus began the torture to follow. For the moment, I was having a blast, and my status as being top drunk was not going to be questioned, especially once I discovered the cheap cider. And we're talking really cheap, like wino in the park fighting with himself shirtless cheap. I would pound those down while playing pool, and I would talk smack to anybody who was hating America at the time. A lot of people were hating America. And then one day, Katrina came, and the pictures on TV were gruesome. Now, hanging out one night in a room filled with Irish folks, I went after the English occupation and how if they really wanted their freedom, they would fight for it like Americans did and stop picking potatoes in their free time. I backed myself into a corner with my words, and they were pissed. Then I let them have it with, if the Irish didn't want to waste their time drinking, they might have done something worthwhile, like kick the damn English out of their country, or maybe launch a rocket into outer space instead of just getting pushed around. After each insult, I would take a drink, and they slowly realized I was playing my own drinking game. One of the Irish came to understand, like the Aussie did, that I was one of the rare breed that understood how to enjoy life with excess partying. One night, me, this Cornish fellow, and a Canadian were kind of broken bored. The Canadian had a mandolin, the Cornish dude had a pair of spoons, and I provided the vocals for a group sitting in an alley, singing our hearts out for a few extra pounds. Our hit went a little something like this. Oh, I'm stuck in Edinburgh, haven't got a dime. But if I had a pound, I'd buy me a bottle of wine. Now this vocal was heard by the masses walking by, and well, people were tossing us spare change, cigarettes, and one couple gave us a bottle of wine. We had drunks sitting with us, singing along. It was a night to remember, for at the end of the night, we made around 60 pounds each and a pack of smokes. The wine got drank while we were singing our tune. This became a ritual until the owner of the pub next door to us got upset that we were upstaging his jukebox. So, passing out flyers got me good exercise, among other things. It also put me in a position to hit on every woman who walked past me, and I could get into the clubs for free. One night, I bumped into Frenchie, and he asked me to deliver a package to Dover. So I went to pick up the car, dropped off the package, and received another package to take back. I did so, and the car was a piece of crap, but it was free, and I found hitchhikers to pay for gas. Now I got back to Frenchie. He gave me a rather large sum of money, and then I went out for a nice dinner, a few concerts, and made a trip to protest the G8, where I got tear gassed and hit with a baton. Worst of all, the car was towed. It took the rest of the cash to get it out. After that, I made my way back to the hostel. One day, the people from the Flyers came by and asked me to help the yoga place with loading their new mats into storage. There I met a nice Jewish Scot girl who made me feel bad that I wasn't limber like she was. She gave some free lessons, so to say. And then I bumped into an Israeli on the street and we started talking. My Hebrew was still pretty bad, but we swapped war stories and info for a few minutes. I soon developed the urge to drive a bit, so I picked up an Aussie and we took off. Then we picked up some girls and, well, I passed out in Barcelona and woke up in Paris. Then we made our way back to Scotland, hanging out with Dirty Dave and Wally. These guys were cool, and they liked the fact I had no regards for social norms. A few days later, I'd been drinking with the Israeli, debating peace and religion, when it occurred to me that maybe I was running away from my spiritual nature by doing all the drugs and crawling into a bottle. Things had to change, but I wasn't sure what to do. At some point, I sold the car for a couple of drinks and some cash. The next few days were rough, as I've been puking this black stuff every time I ate or drank anything. After 3 days of this, I went to a hospital at the urging of Dougal, an elderly man who was just living out his final days at the hostel so he could be near his daughter. Dougal was full of advice, some for the taking, some for the leaving, but one thing he made clear to me was that you have to live your life, and you can't let others do it for you or tell you how to do it. In the hospital, after a few hours, I found out that due to my excessive drinking, my esophagus had swollen shut, and they used a scope to make it wider, but I needed to lay off the booze for a few days. I did as the doctor said and went back to the hostel, and somehow I needed to go home, for I was just tearing up on the inside. I didn't feel right. I wanted to be a little more productive and making a difference in the world. I still believe that old line from Knight Rider that one man can make a difference. So I returned to America, battered and bruised, but ready for a fight. Chapter 18. Whoops! Upon my return to Memphis with a couple bottles of scotch and some cookies for my grandmother, my dignity was intact. I went to my grandparents, sat down, talked with them, all was well. They were about to go down to Florida for the winter. I was going to stay at their house for a while and figure some things out. After a week of hanging out with Lunchbox and Congo, who had moved in together, and Congo had gotten engaged, Lunchbox was dating. I had little choice but to look for a job or find something to do. I remember meeting a guy in Scotland who told me about teaching English in Korea. Now, he had met some of my other friends and was sharing a flat with them. I sent an email asking how to do that, and then I looked into teaching in Korea. All the teaching agency wanted was a college degree and little else. They provided airfare, rent, and paid close to $3,000 a month, which for a single person was enough to live like a king. I started doing the visa work and dealing with contracts, but not really preparing for what was next. I got hired after less than 2 weeks, and I was leaving the next week. Now, me and my dog were happy hanging out at my grandparents', and I smoked a bowl with her as her cancer was coming back. I focused all my energy on the spot where her cancer was, attempting to drain it and take the pain into myself. Why? Because it's a spiritual healing trick I learned from a rabbi. And if I was a jerk, I could have passed it into another living being. But I'm a man, I could take it. I went out with Quattro one night before I left. Had a great time. I left the dog in my room so she wouldn't make a mess at my grandparents' house. Well, I got back, and the front door was open. The house had been broken into. I felt like crap. I called the cops and then my whacked out mother to spread the news. The next day I called my uncle and then my grandparents. Now they came back from Florida to say goodbye, but my grandfather accused me of breaking into the house, of being the one who stole all their stuff. This made me furious, even more so than the time I paid my grandmother back money. She had Alzheimer's and he was in denial about it. A few weeks after he accused me of not paying her back, he took the car that he had given me for graduation and sold it. I wasn't upset, I was pissed. I knew he was an asshole. My grandmother would never let anyone forget that. So he blamed me for stealing everything, except for the computer and old TV that were still there. That's why I insisted it was my doing, because I knew they were crap. There were no signs of a busted lock or anything, and about a year later, the news ran a story about lock popping and how it left no visible signs of a break-in. So my grandfather was pissed at me, and my grandmother was crying because I was going off to Asia. It was a little stressful, but I just buried it inside, figured I would drown it out later. My friend Congo asked me what I was running from, and Lunchbox was planning on going to Iraq any day. I got a ride to the airport with Box and told Minda I'd see her in a year or so. With that, I took off to Chicago, and after a 5-hour layover, I boarded a plane to Japan, a nice 12-hour flight or so. I couldn't talk to anybody on the plane, and I was in a middle seat. But lucky for me, drinks were still free on overseas flights. I took all the crap I had dealt with and told myself, once I hop off this plane, I'm not going to look back. I also had no idea what to expect. There was a little anxiety, but more just anticipation. I got off the plane with 2 bottles of Jack and 2 cartons of Marlboro Reds. I was in Japan for an hour, long enough to know that the people there were very weird. The ramen noodles on the plane should have made that obvious, but who am I to judge? I got to Seoul, and I was met by the recruiter, who tossed me on a bus and gave me directions for when I got off. It was a 6-hour bus ride to Daegu, and I got to ride next to some old lady who kept looking at me like I was going to snatch her purse and rape her grandchild. I got off the bus, and standing there was my new boss, a short lady, and her husband, a tall man, and their youngest son who spoke English. I was to stay at their home for 2 nights before moving into my apartment. Once I arrived at their home, I was given a quick examination about my history, and they asked all kinds of questions that made no sense. Then the big question, "You are Judah, yes? From Bible. I think you people are very smart and honorable." Yeah, just when I thought I could escape religion, it smacked me in the face. On day 1, I was given a tour of government offices and doing the things that were needed to get my Korean work permit. Then I met the teacher I was replacing, who informed me not to trust the old lady, but the old man was honest and cool. I should have asked him a few more questions, but figured how hard could it be? I was used to being broke, and I didn't mind being out of contact with my family. And that's where we leave off for this episode before continuing Jeff's adventures in Korea. And you might recognize a name from some of my short stories, Lunchbox or Officer Box. That's dearly departed friend Sean Michael Bolton, a Marine and one of Memphis PD's finest when he was with us. I do recommend you look him up, and just know that whatever you find, he was an even better man than what they say. But also, Quattro. That was a nickname for another friend of mine, Jason Smith, who I had known for years. Jeff met through me, and they hung out a lot at the bars because I wasn't into the bar scene because I was broke. Well, Jason/Quattro, he was broke too, but he was willing to drink all of his money away. And so him and Jeff hung out plenty. But alas, Quattro's dead too. So 3 out of 4 of my best friends from Memphis, all dead. If you live there, I promise you, get out of there. It will be better for you. That place devours people. And so unfortunately, I leave that rather exciting international whirlwind touring of Jeff's on that sour explanatory note, but it is what it is. I'm the one who carries the history now. So my dear friends, if this provoked any reactions or thoughts in you, please drop those in the comments below. Like and subscribe, share this around. I'm sure one of your friends will find it interesting. And that's what I got for now. So until next time, I wish you nothing but the best.